today we intend to present the writing of a research proposal. And what we do, we would look at various parts and all the components that build up into a research proposal. But what will happen is that later on in other workshops, we will try to unpack the research proposal and look at individual components. So I do believe that even colleagues that are not here will be able to benefit from future workshops. Today, I have even included my email address, um, macherehc@gmail.com, for those who would want to communicate via emails. But let's just again repeat our introductory remarks as we do always. We also want to acknowledge that this workshop is being recorded and that the recording will be made available via the correct channel, the platform. It is our YouTube platform. We also want to repeat that our one-on-one sessions will continue, and the identified days for engagement with myself on one-on-one are Mondays, Wednesdays, and all Fridays. Those who want to have one-on-one, do so by sending the email to me and the coordinators. Then they indicate an area of focus when we have one-on-one. If they have documents that they want to share with me, they share the documents. I look at the document and make comments. After I've made comments, if there's need for a one-on-one for follow-up and to provide clarity on the comments, we hold another one-on-one. So today, I also want to continue to emphasize that I've again selected specific literature, and I've just chosen specific areas that are mainly components of the research proposal. And this is what will assist us in moving with the workshop. And as I say, these are guidelines which I present, and I do agree that other authors might have written it differently, but the main components remain the same. There's an agreement on that. Some components are optional in terms of the discipline and the type of study that people or researchers are undertaking. So everybody would have his own understanding, whether you are a beginner in research or you are an experienced research. People have got preferences and they would read different literature, after which their understanding is theirs. And that is what is interesting in research, that although we differ in perspective, the common ground is the objective that we want to achieve. And every time when we use literature, my recommendation is that if we make a choice of a specific approach or a specific structure of our proposal, it means we must be able to defend that. And if we use appropriate literature and empirical studies, no one is going to shoot us down. So during these workshops, we will open for discussions, and we will do this by pausing from time to time after some few slides. When we introduce a theme, a sub-theme, or a concept, we pause and then reflect on what we were presenting. Then we have discussions and questions on that. So this is to make sure that our workshop is not monotonous, but it is interactive, that not only one person can speak, but all of us can speak, because we do have different backgrounds. So today we're going to focus on why we need a proposal, criteria on which research proposals are judged, and this would be based on the criteria for a specific organization, but generically more or less the same with other institutions. I'll indicate which institution it is. Then we would start looking at the various components of the research proposals. And this would be the abstract, the title, the keywords, the aims of the research, the rationale or the background, literature review, delimitation of the study, the research design, and the research methodology. As an introduction, it is said that research is an activity that is essentially in the public domain. The kinds of issues that are being researched, the way in which they are addressed and investigated, and the dissemination of the findings are all embedded in shared practices. Becoming a researcher is like joining an academic conversation. You listen, if in terms of research, if you're part of the research team or the research community, you listen to what the topic of conversation is. You note who responds to whom. You become aware of certain groupings and dominant trends, and you observe certain similarities and differences that emerge. And here I emphasize that what I just read is what researchers do. So if you're part of the research community, this is the engagement and the interaction that you will be involved in. This is a discourse of the of the researchers. If you are a researcher, you are part of a community of discussants. You share ideas, building on what others have said. You'll remember, a lot has been written about research. So, and we have even said earlier on that our research can build on earlier studies by way of closing the gaps or extending the study. We will discuss more about this. And sometimes when we unpack the problem statement, we'll be able to deal deeply with how do we close gaps, and how do we identify the gaps. You also replicate the findings, you ask questions and contribute to the public debate. And when you are a researcher, there is always an anticipation that you will eventually contribute to the body of knowledge. And if you go to the significance of your study, if you have a research proposal, you will remember that you were encouraged to indicate how the study will contribute to the body of knowledge. So all these aspects are what will be your daily bread. So it is said that it is appropriate that your proposed research is laid out for inspection and comment by others in the academic community. This is mainly because you are partners in the research. But the other thing that is very important is that a researcher, a beginner in research, or a researcher doing research for academic purposes, does not conduct research alone, because the university has got a college where the student is registered. There is sometimes a research committee. There is sometimes the department where the research is located. There is a research supervisor. And eventually, when the output of the research proposal is finalized, your research report, it will also be referred out for peer review by external examiners. So there's a whole lot of people, gatekeepers, stakeholders, and interested parties in the study that is there. So the researcher is part of the whole community that is interested on the research. So your research work will be seen by many people, even apart from the people that are in the same organization where the research is located, as I've referred to external examiners. I want to say this even before we could start talking about what a research proposal is, that research, most of the people fear research. And I used to fear research because of the assumptions and perceptions that I had. I used to believe that research is a very difficult process and is very confusing. And even after I started to conduct research, the first one was very challenging. And until I finished, I was always afraid of what I was doing. I started to become comfortable when I conducted the second research project. But let's just continue and look at what a research proposal is. The guidelines are saying the research proposal is a planning document that outlines your thinking about a research problem and describes what is to be studied and how. Because in your research project, you will see that, especially with the research proposal or chapter 1, you have got various sections, and one of the sections is the background, and that puts the study into context. It can even tell you what has happened in terms of the topic that has been identified. By reading other literature, researchers know what work has been done in the area where they are researching. So there is history that you bring in when you're writing the research background. But apart from doing that, then you need to identify a problem based on what you have read and based on your own experience. But eventually, you need to indicate and demonstrate how you will undertake the research. That is when the research design is needed. We want to know how you will collect data. You want to know how you will analyze data. We want to know how you will identify your informants or how you will execute and carry out your experiments. So that is what this statement is saying, is telling us. The thesis writing is a demanding project for which you need to plan. So here they don't say it is difficult, they say it is demanding. In other words, they're telling us that we must be able to invest time to do it. And as time goes on, when we've invested sufficient time, you will find that even the things that we thought were difficult are challenging. They become manageable as we get accustomed and get used to working with documents and understanding the research concepts and its process and their processes. Without proper planning, it's very likely that your reading will lack direction, your writing will lack focus, and your data collection will run into major problems. Of course, having a research proposal is no guarantee that you will avoid these dangers, but having a clear proposal will certainly minimize wasted time, because if you don't invest on time, you will always want to write what other people tell you. And I want to tell you, not even the supervisor, not even the rector of the university can rescue a researcher, because the researcher is a specialist, is the leader of the research project, is the owner and is the custodian. He is the one that knows the in and out of his project. The study leader is there, although he's called a study leader or the guidance, but most of the work is done by the student. That is why the study leader can only comment after the student has done some work. So investing time that you don't waste, and you would not even be embarrassed. The main challenges that you will face with in writing your research proposals are to move from a research idea to a research problem, to gain clarity on the unit of analysis, to select an appropriate research design, to conform to the style and format of a proposal. Yes, these are some of the suggestions. It is an assumption, because if you don't have these problems, you don't have to be told that you've got problems. And I wish you don't experience these problems, because you are unique, you are on your own, and you will be able to succeed in executing your research projects. Firstly, the research proposal is a document that outlines your thinking about the research problem, the questions of what you wish to study, and how it should be done. Then we have said that the study design must indicate on that, because it has got a section on the research methods. The research methods, the research methodology is where we tell everybody how we will conduct our study and that we want to investigate. We are in the documents, then as well as these questions will be. In a nutshell, the research proposal is a project planning document. Bodies you are thinking about this, envisage it at the project. This implies that the more thought you have put in your proposed research, the better developed, organized, and logical the research proposal will be. So we're just saying that if we think more, and here thinking more does not mean that we just sit and think. It means we are studying documents, we are studying articles, we're studying books, we are studying reports. And you might find that even the topic that some of us would be investigating might have been studied by other people earlier on. So the way we would do that, we study it, might be just to tweak it or to change the focus of the specific focus topic that we've changed. So it means that we shall have a lot of background material in the form of literature that is written about the topic. So if it has not been written about, then we are lucky that we are going to break new grounds. And that is how we will contribute to the body of knowledge. But I'm just emphasizing that literature will rescue us, will assist us to think and structure and make sure that what we write and what we put in a proposal makes sense. A proposal, therefore, usually gives a good indication of whether you have done sufficient preparation for the study, which is through studying, as a reflection of your thinking at that time. It tells the supervisor how much you have thought about and considered the problem, whether you have managed to put your research ideas into writing in a clear and unambiguous manner, and whether you have a good idea of where you are heading with your research. All these is what the supervisor must be looking at, because the supervisor must advise you not to venture into something that is not researchable. And there he can only be confident if you demonstrate that, and you demonstrate that by presenting a good and well thought, well structured research proposal. Secondly, the research proposal forms the basis for the working relationship between you and the supervisor. In this sense, the proposal is like a contract or an agreement. You are effectively telling your supervisor what you wish to study and how. Once he or she has accepted your proposal and has given his or her approval for you to continue, an agreement has been reached and a kind of a contract has been drawn up between the two of you. And colleagues, let me emphasize that in this relationship between the researcher and the study supervisor, the dynamic is the study supervisor has got a role to play, but the student has got a role to play. The two of them need to agree on terms of reference, and exactly this is what we are told here. And therefore, the terms of reference is contained in our research proposal. So in a research proposal, I would have indicated what I want to do. So an agreement and an approval of the research proposal the research projects to continue is via a proposal. So once a proposal is approved, the supervisor has agreed to supervise and support the student in every step and in every aspect as detailed in the research project, which is a research proposal. On the other hand, the student commits to actually execute the tasks as the student has detailed in the research project. And we don't want to see, you see, the challenge that is there between in the academic environment is that students would be saying, so and so lecturer or study supervisor is not retaining my work. Or the study leader would be saying, so and so student is not submitting tasks so that I can supervise. So that is not a good environment. The student must do their parts. supervisors must also do their part. That is what would create a good environment, a working environment between the two. But the basis of all this, we are told, and we should agree with them, that it is a research proposal. And why do you need a research proposal? So somebody has used an analogy of a car, or sorry, an analogy for of a traveler who departs from Pretoria to Polokwane, where arrangements must be made, whether it is to service a car or to put petrol or to get money for toll gates or to sleep somewhere on the road or to make sure that the journey is succeeded. So this is an analogy that they presented. They are saying, like a traveler who aims to undertake a journey, the proposal is your map, your itinerary. You see, the itinerary of a student, a study project is a proposal. The preparations you have undertaken and list of necessary provisions for the journey, they are contained in the research proposal. The research proposal is a way of thinking clearly about the destination you want to get to, because it has got objectives that tell you where you are going. It has got a purpose or the main goal that tells you where you are going. And in this proposal, then it also tells you what you would need to get there. So the methodological section would even tell you how you will get there, the means of getting there, and the arrangements you have to make in order to undertake the research is contained in the research proposal. Without such a proposal, you might very easily get lost. So it is what you need in order to get where you want to go. Then the research proposal is a key document in that it is both a backward and forward looking. It documents your thinking thus far, but also outlines the anticipated events. This dual nature of a proposal is concretely reflected in the use of the past tense or sometimes in the present tense as well as the future tense. It serves as a means of communication for approval because the research proposal must be submitted to the departmental ethics committee, where it is sanctioned, where it is approved, and when it goes there, it means the research supervisor is also satisfied. So it has got an important function of communicating so that it can be approved by the university. It is a plan so that we can use it to travel, and it is a contract so that it can regulate relationships between the researcher and the researched. As I've said earlier on, it looks in the past on what has happened in the topic under investigation, and this we get by reading literature that has been written about the topic. But it also is a forward-looking document in that it indicates what is going to be done. The methodological section indicates what is going to be done, and the research purpose or the research objectives would tell us what we want to do, the specific activities in order to reach the destination. So the methodology is there, the focus is there, the vision and the binocular is there, which is saying we are going there and this is how we will reach the destination. What I'm going to read here is based on the University of Western Cape, and what I'm presenting is from an article from my personal. I just forgot to write the source. I can provide it when it is necessary. But the criteria here are used to judge or to evaluate the proposal, if the proposal is worth of pursuing. We hear that we need to bear in mind that different supervisors and examiners look for different things. That is why we're advised to discuss with our supervisors the main points that we should develop clearly in the research proposal. However, in general, the following questions are usually considered in the examination of the proposals. Although this is with reference to the University of Western Cape. No, sorry, it is the University of Cape Town, isn't it? Yes, UCT, University of Cape Town. Now, these are what people see as generic. Supervisors would look at whether you have a clear idea of what you plan to research. And people who just jumble mumble, who do not have direction, it's easy to pick up that this person is not focused. Does your proposal have a focus? Is a topic worthy of academic study and significance? All of these, I think supervisors are well vested and well equipped to immediately pick this up because they're trained to do that. Do you demonstrate an adequate understanding of the debates in the literature on this topic? If you have not read, we will see how you write. And if you have read, we can see, because you will be understanding the current discourse in the subject matter. You would have read old literature, recent literature, and very recent. Sometimes you can even find literature under preparation. So if you have read, there is no way that it would not be seen, because your arguments will demonstrate a clear understanding of the concept and the current discourse, the current discussions about the subject matter, which is your topic, which is under investigation. Supervisor would look for whether you demonstrate an adequate understanding of the debates in the literature on this topic. Is the project feasible? Can it be researched? Do you have a realistic idea of how you are going to tackle the investigation? And then that is where your methodologies come in. Do you have clear, detailed, and well-presented approach for identifying informants or carrying out your experiments? How you will collect data, present and analyze. Is it doable within the time constraints? Do you want to research the whole world? And colleagues, it's always challenging for the people that are doing research for the first time, because sometimes they become over ambitious because they think research is that big thing, and they think that they just want to go big, and they don't know that when they want to go big, they become small because they will not be visible. They will be swallowed by the world. You sometimes can collect data that you will not even be able to analyze, or you will continue to collect data forever without even finishing the process. Does the bibliography and referencing conform to accepted conventions? Is it technically faultless? So all these things are the ones that convince the study leader that you are on the right course, and you can enter into contract with him. He can supervise you. You will be able to work together. This, I want to skip this section. How do I decide on a topic? It's a very long one. It can take the entire session, it's a workshop. But I did work on it. But what I would want to recommend is that we shelve it. And if it is necessary, and if I find time, I'm interested on workshopping it as an independent topic, so we can look at it in future workshops. But I want to, for now, to skip all the slides that talk about the topic. All these are actually about the topic. We want to look at components of a research proposal. As indicated earlier on when we started, these are the major focus of this workshop. What are the parts of the proposal? There are various ways in which proposals can be structured. There's a disturbance. Very often, there are differences between scientific disciplines, maths and biology. Then the components might differ. Between scientific cultures, natural and social sciences, there might be a different types of research, empirical or literature-based, which are reflected in the structure of the proposal. Check with your supervisor whether there is a specific structure you need to follow in terms of the discipline and the type of research project that you want to pursue. However, most of the proposals require the following parts in their proposal. Sorry, in the research. And this is what the structure of the proposal always looks like. And these are the aspects, the components that must be built in that leads to the development of research proposal. It's a working title, which is provisional every time, because to and fro, as we continue with literature review, and as we continue with the study, executing the study project, we rethink forward and backwards. And this lashes on the title or on the topic of the, on the research topic, which might sometimes confirm the topic or assist us to revise the topic if the topic does not sit well with us. The proposal should also provide the background of the rationale, preliminary literature study. Here, they indicate it is optional. Problem statement and or research problem, research design or research or approach to the study, and objective or purpose of the study, the hypothesis, which is also optional, the research methodology, or research methods, the timeframes and limitations of the research, outline of the chapters and references. I think those that have accomplished their research proposals or that have got guidelines might agree with me that some of these components actually have been seen in their guidelines. So I think we cannot debate much about that, and we will allow ourselves to comply with it as part of the guidelines. And if there's need to change, the departments and the study leaders will advise us. But there is an important component, which is the cover page of the research proposal. And here we can confirm that these guidelines have been written about the University of Western Cape. Sorry, it is not UCT, it's University of the Western Cape. And the cover page has got a name of a candidate, student number, proposed degree, program or department, title or thesis, title of the thesis, the supervisor and the co-supervisor. And I've just made an extract of one of my study reports, and I went to find that the title there was The Role of Vendor Culture in Nature Conservation. And I also answered who wrote it as myself there and why. Then thesis submitted in complete fulfillment of the requirements of the degree of Master of Technology, Nature Conservation. Who requested it? It is at the Port Elizabeth Technicon, and the two supervisors are there. Promoter M. Cameron and co-promoter MJ Geiger, and there is the date 6 April 2001. And this is a very simple one because we would be told what to write, and I don't think we will go wrong once we do that. If we do our homework better, even the title or the topic will be written there. It won't be a confusing one because we shall have done our homework, being guided by our supervisors. But the second thing that is important is an abstract, which should be written in no more than 500 words. This is a suggestion and guidelines. You must say what your central problem question is, why it is a problem with your study, and how you will go about studying it. I noted that at UNISA, some departments require that you have an abstract as part of the proposal, and this is what these guidelines are saying. In my life, I've never provided an abstract before finishing the research report. Everything that I've done, it only had introduction and background. By the way, introduction can only be written after the study is completed. So I would go straight and start with the background. So the abstract came at last. Your abstract should be brief, clear and informative, giving a clear indication of what is intended and why. In addition to your full proposal, students will need to prepare a one-pager summary of the proposal. That is apart from the abstract and apart from the full research proposal. The full proposal and one-page summary must be submitted to the faculty to the faculty higher degree committee, and one-page summary will be forwarded to the Senate higher degree. This is in terms of the University of Western Cape. In terms of UNISA, I don't know where you submit all these things, but I think you might be knowing on your own, and I would want to hear from you. When we post, you can tell me where you submit all these things. The one-page summary must include, this is guidelines again, student name, number, degree, for which registered, department in which registered, thesis title, abstract of 500 words, and 10 key terms. And the next aspect, which is important, is the actually, this is an example of what an abstract is and that which I've written. And colleagues, I want to tell you that I use my examples. These examples are from my research reports, and I'm objectively presenting them here without fear of criticism or being commended or being supported. And I know that as I grew, my understanding of the research concept also grew. But when I started, I struggled, as I told you. So what I've written earlier times, long time ago, might not be what my present understanding is. But we are allowed to discuss and discourage it. So this is one of the abstract or the executive summary of the project. The topic was the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. And I've shown you the cover, the cover page. So I'm going to read, and you would tell me if this is indeed an abstract or is an executive summary. I've made my own comments in black. This thesis investigates the role of vendor culture in nature conservation and natural resources management. The project is based on the premise that the survival of human beings is entirely dependent on the extent to which different cultures conserve the natural environment. The researcher assumes that the scientific approach is not the only one that is capable of addressing environmental issues, but that indigenous technology has a positive role to play. Okay, I said this first paragraph is relevant, but the other thing that I must say to you is that an executive summary must not be a lot of information. It must be just a summary. And other authors have even recommended that it should be just one paragraph. Mine was very long. I don't know if it was 2 pages or I just forgotten, but it was not one paragraph. It was not a pager. But look at this very first paragraph. It's only about, it's very long and does not capture a lot of information. Although I say relevant, but I think it is too long. You can say your own comments afterwards when we pause. And don't forget, the study specifically looks at the relationship between the vendor culture and conservation of land, water, plants, and animals. In order to achieve this goal, the study was divided into 5 chapters. You see now, this is what is contained in the research proposal and in the first chapter. But I started to waffle here, which is not. That's why I said it is irrelevant. But it is a middle paragraph. You see, it means there are a lot of paragraphs again when I said it is too long. But the information contained in this paragraph is not needed as part of the abstract because it goes to chapter 1. When you close chapter 1, you indicate what each of the chapters that we're following are going to focus on. Let me read now this last paragraph from the executive summary again. It says, the recognition of the vendor indigenous technology of natural resource management has been proposed because of its importance in nature conservation. In the recommendations, the formalization of policy that overlook local values was criticized. The use of vendor approach as a basis for the development of conservation projects was strongly recommended. Lastly, it was proposed that further investigation of specific aspects of the vendor culture be considered for possible incorporation in future management of the natural environment. The paragraph is relevant because in your executive summary, you can indicate what recommendations were done. What I saw as other aspects that were missing is that I never said anything about the methodology or the approach that was used in conducting this study. I also did not say much about, I don't think I said much about the locality. So even the findings, or at least these are the recommendations and part and parcel of the findings. But I believe that there were gaps in my executive summary. But I want to leave it to you so that when we pause, you can make your comments. Don't forget, you have to make comments on this and as well as on the criteria of where you submit your research proposal. Let me move a little bit so that we don't waste a lot of time. Now, you also have to provide a title, and we have said I didn't deal much with how you identify a title or you deal with it, but it is important. Let's suffice to say that if you've got a title, it should convey clearly and succinctly the topic being researched. The title should be brief and provide a good idea about the focus of the thesis. You must avoid obscure and unnecessary lengthy titles because they tend to misrepresent and miscommunicate, and they mislead the readers. And keywords are also important. Here, the recommendation is you need to provide 10 keywords or composite words which convey what the thesis is about. The keywords should be in a particular sequence. The first should give a broader indication of the field of the research. The second should give a more specific indication. The third should be even more specific, and so on. Some programs insist on individual keywords. Others allow composite words. Check with your supervisor or check the policy of your institution. Maybe the university has got guidelines on how you need to do this. If they don't need keywords, they will tell you. If they need keywords, they must guide how these keywords should be presented, composite or individual. Take care when putting your keywords together because this will be entered into a library catalog and made available to a worldwide research community. Your keywords should reflect in a kind of telegram style the main areas of concepts of your thesis so that someone who reads them can get a fairly clear idea of focus of your thesis and development of your discussion. You will remember that when we were talking about literature review, we said an abstract assists readers in identifying. It can even assist a student to find out if this is a relevant literature. By reading the abstract, you get what the focus of the research topic, the research project is, or the article, or the first chapter. So the manner in which the keywords are written also contribute to assisting readers and other people who are interested on our work to find about what we are writing, to find more about what we are writing about. And therefore they can further study or just discard the material. And the other thing which is important, which is mentioned here, is that when you put keywords, you are to be careful because these keywords are not only meant for you and they're not only meant for the supervisor or the university, then it is meant for the international community because there is a possibility that your work will be published and it goes viral. And even if it is not published in an article, if the electronic copy is shared internationally through electronic devices, everybody will be able to read internationally. So they read you, then be careful that you're putting it correctly. And here I've just taken an extract from one of the journals to indicate how they've included the keywords. And there, keywords you can see: Lake Funduzi catchment, cultural tourism, ecotourism, adventure tourism, tourism resources, and community. And what I want to comment on here is that I did not follow any format. It was just me who just put this, knowing that these words would always appear when readers are going through the document. So I've put them in here. I didn't know that you can put broad them in terms of the logic as broad to the specific. I didn't know that. I'm knowing it now, which means that in future I can even improve on how I put keywords. But this is how keywords are put in documents. The other thing which is of importance is the aims of the research. You must draw a clear distinction between an academic aim and a strategic aim. An academic aim is the issue or a problem your thesis hopes to address on the basis of developments in the academic literature and aimed at an academic audience. But there's another one which they refer to as a strategic aim, which is aimed at a non-academic audience. In other words, the research, remember the other day we were talking about basic research and what is that practical research? There's that terminology that I've forgotten. The research that focuses, no, it is referred to as applied research. Applied research is meant to actually solve real world problems, but basic research is specifically meant for academics. But what we noted is that there is also an interaction between basic research and applied research, in that applied research can also be implemented because it can solve real world situations. And applied research, even if it is meant for solving real world problems, it can also contribute to the body of knowledge, the theory building, and all those things. So the two work interchangeably, and they can support each other. But if you are a student, you're writing for an academic audience. Therefore, the aim should be an academic aim because it is for an academic studies. So there's a recommendation that when you write these aims, you can use words such as explore, investigate, analyze, determine, interpret, understand, demarcate, critique, ascertain, compare, contrast, and evaluate, as well as assess. These are just guidelines. And I want to move very fast to go and see if we don't have an example of purposes or aims. Here, I've referred to mine as a purpose statement or as the purpose of the study. And let me read for you. It says, the purpose and the objectives of the study are fundamental to the successful execution of the research project due to the fact that they give direction of the study. In other words, well-crafted purpose or aim directs the study. These two aspects will be presented in the section. And we start with the purpose of the study. And this is from the project completed in 2012. The title was Tourism Framework for Sustainable Development in the Catchment of Lake Funduzi. This is the one example that we were presenting during the conceptual framework. Now, the purpose statement read like this. The purpose of this study is to develop a tourism framework for sustainable development in the catchment of Lake Funduzi. This purpose is based on a premise that the Lake Funduzi catchment has a significant potential for tourism development and that it may become an important tourist destination. More particularly, the study aims to achieve the following specific research objectives. When I was going through the article that I extracted these guidelines from, there was no mention of research objectives, but there was a mention of a research question, but it was not under this section. It was only mentioned when there was a presentation of a research problem. But here we just want to look at the example of research aims, and I went on to indicate that research aims or the research, the purpose of the research is supported by the study objectives or the research objectives. And that is the reason why in this slide, I present the study objectives that should be in line with the purpose statement. And I tell you, the purpose statement should give effects to the research topic. The research topic and the purpose statement and the research objectives, all of them should be streamlined because they support each other and they give direction to the study. The objectives were: 1, to review economic, socio-cultural, and environmental impacts relating to tourism planning and sustainable development. Objective number 2, 1422, to utilize PAR or participatory action research as a research methodology with a view to encourage the involvement of rural communities in sustainable tourism development. Number 3, to identify the natural and cultural tourism resources of the Lake Funduzi catchment. And number 4, to investigate types of tourism that may be promoted to pursue economic developments. You should be noting active verbs here, such as to investigate, to identify, to utilize, to review. This is what we were advised, that we need to use active words, the verbs that show that we're going to take action. And they were referring to purpose statements. Then I just have brought it down to the level of objectives to show that you can also give effect. You can also follow the guidelines when you give effect to the purpose statement. And I want to pause here again so that I can give an opportunity for comments And if there are questions, we can pose them. And I also want to hear if we are on course, we are together. We have just done an hour. We are left with an hour to finish what I think should constitute today's workshop. And it is mainly the components of the research proposal. The floor is open for comments. And Belinda, if they raise hands, please give them an opportunity to make comments. And they can indicate if they are lost or if they are on course. Or if we're all together, we're moving together.
Yes, Doc. I'd like to find out what's the difference between a problem statement and a purpose statement.
Um, my understanding is that the problem statement, actually, let me start by saying that they are all very, very important, because your purpose statement gives direction. It is a focus on the destination. Is the one that tells us where we're going. But the problem statement, we define the problem. What is the that is where, for an example, you will indicate the gap that is there in the topic. And this gap is identified from the literature review. And that is where you put the rationale for conducting the study. I want to extend the recommendation as per the previous studies, or I want to improve on the methodology because the methodology used in the previous studies were like this and that, or I want to expand the studies. There was a recommendation by an earlier study. So that is the problem statement. But the purpose is based on what you are telling us, the ultimate journey of the research project is. And I've just said earlier on, the purpose statement is aligned with the research topic. This topic that I presented as an example, tourism framework for sustainable development, then that is why the purpose said, in line with the topic, the purpose is to develop a tourism framework, because the topic says development of a tourism framework. But in the statement of a problem, then I must indicate what is the challenge in terms of the topic. Then I'm talking about a framework. Earlier on last week, I was always arguing that there were frameworks in the SADC for sustainable tourism development. And these frameworks, some of them were in protected areas, some of them were in rural areas. But I said the problem is none of them focused on a sacred area like Lake Funduzi, where the tourism framework that I wanted to develop was focusing. So that is my niche, and that niche is going to close the gap. The gap is no sustainable framework on a sacred area. So my problem is that there is no existing framework in a sacred area. So that is the difference that I can say that exists between the purpose statement and the problem statement. By the way, the purpose statement can also be derived from a research question, because we can pose a question which, when it's answered, we develop a purpose statement. And this is the reason why when you have sub-research questions, you eventually use them to develop objectives that should support your research purpose. Is there another question?
Can I please check with regards to the objectives? Is there a
Yes.
guideline, or is it compulsory to say you must have not more than 4 or 5 objectives in your study? And then also emanating from the objectives, is it true that your objectives will guide you as to what do you need to cover in your literature review? Thank you, Doc.
Okay, let me start with the first one. I'm also of a view that your objectives should not be more than 5. And the most that I have ever investigated were 5. By the way, in this one, I presented only 4. There was Another one, the fifth one, was not part of the original plan research proposal. It emerged because during the research, the findings actually demonstrated that there is more information that is not even falling in under any of the objectives. And then we went on to craft another one. And it is somewhere here. I think, I don't know if I presented it last week with the theoretical concept, conceptual framework. But I do not know if there are written guidelines, but I've been guided, or I used to guide others, that you don't have to have too many. And how I can motivate it is that if there are too many, then you're gonna do a lot and you're gonna run around, and sometimes the study can lose direction because you cannot investigate too much. And even if there is a problem, you cannot investigate everything. That is why somewhere I wish when you also remind me, there is a slides that talk about delimitation. Your delimitation is the scoping procedure, is the scope, it provides the scope for your research. You set boundaries that I will only research at Tshwane. I'm not going outside at Tshwane, although my study is in Gauteng. And you will also say, although my study is in Tshwane, I'm only concentrating on small businesses. I'm not going to touch larger businesses. You see, now you are limiting. So the same applies to research objectives. They limit so that you don't research too much. Otherwise, you're going to be too superficial and collect too much data. Sometimes the data that you collect, you will never even be able to analyze. Or sometimes you collect data forever because the objectives are too many. So I think this is actually meant to ensure that you limit, you delimit the study, you give it focus. You're not too big, and it is not ponderous. It is feasible. Remember, in the research proposal, one criteria that you will be looked at, the supervisor will look at, is the feasibility of doing so. Do you have the capacity in terms of time and other resources, money, transport, and everything? So we limit. If we research too much things, then it will become superficial and the project does not become feasible. What was that other second one? I forgot the second part.
It was to check if the objectives can really guide your literature review. The reason why I'm asking it now is because Doctor has already covered the topic on literature review. So yes. I wanted to cross-check if the objectives can assist you in any way in covering what must be under the literature review.
Yes. I think your objectives are a guideline. What I also tell people is that your objectives might even guide you in terms of the chapters of the research report. Not all will make reference to literature review. But what we know is that whether we are analyzing data, you see, when we analyze data, you sometimes even make comparative analysis between the findings and what literature said. And I think in one of the presentation, I showed how when you are using a theoretical framework, you have got a literature that has to be compared with what your findings are. So you can still be guided by the objectives, but you will continue to use literature everywhere. But the other aspect is that you in some of the objectives, you can find that they specifically talk about literature review. For an example, I've got in the organizational design one, 2 chapters were informed by the research objectives. The first one was to look at the establishment and the present practices of establishing catchment management agencies. So that required me to read how the existing practices were. And there I also included a legislation. So you would see that in most cases, your supervisor would even encourage you to go and look at legislation. So there that can be written as part of the objective. But my other objective is the one that has introduced a theoretical framework, where I had chapter 3 dedicated solely on the review and the presentation of the theories of organizational design. And I had a dedicated chapter that could even go up to 20 pages. And I think I presented this, I showed it to you. So those two objectives were specifically saying something about the need to review literature. But the rest of although the rest, actually even um, the last objective on organizational design was saying, based on empirical evidence and literature review, recommendations will be made. So it is saying, I will read literature and I will collect data, empirical data, and use literature and empirical data to make specific recommendations when I close the study. So it's important. Objectives can guide even on how literature, what literature should look at.
My question was with regards to the sample population that we collect.
Yes.
So let's say we can make our scope less wide by sort of localizing it to specific areas.
Yes.
My question is, for example, with my research, my sample population will be parents and guardians of young children in South Africa.
Yes.
And I went and said, okay, maybe I'll just interview parents and guardians from Gauteng and Western Cape. And that's might be biased because it's just because I know more people in those specific provinces. My question is, do I have to have a certain motivation behind why I'm choosing people in those provinces? Because I guess every province has parents and guardians, but I can't reach all of them.
Yes, it also has to do with delimitation. You cannot study everything. This is what we are told. You take a sample, and your sample might be geographical. You see, I've presented what you told me, the two examples that you said. If it is Western Cape and Gauteng, it is a geographical delimitation. If it is parents with, then it is a delimitation in terms of a specific grouping of people. But in every respect, under your methodology, you have to justify why you have identified those. And you remember, we said sometimes we'll use there are two principal sampling designs: probability and non-probability. And there is a way you must remember. Sometimes there are studies that are generalizable and studies that are not generalizable. So your motivation has to be strong why you are only studying them. I think when we go to delimitations, I've made specific motivation why I'm studying in a specific locality, and why in a specific locality I'm choosing, or I'm not doing the whole lot of it. And you cannot just study everything. You can limit. I think when we do sampling design, we will be able to deal much with that one. And I think it is part and parcel of the workshops that are still coming.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I did not read much about it today, and I feel that I should be saying more, but remind me in future. And if you want us to engage outside here, I think I'll have more insight on it. Then we can talk more about it.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you. Can we continue now? In this section, where we talk about the rationale or the background of the study, you need to explain a number of aspects. You need to firstly present the context that gives rise to a research project. What conditions have led you to propose your research project, and to define your aims in the way that you have done? You may be aware of certain events, processes, and debates, and be of the view that certain issues require systematic and focused research. You can be a view that the current knowledge of certain issues is inadequate. You can also be of a view that there are disagreement. But you also, apart from the context, you need to provide a motivation under background why you are undertaking the study. What is your intent in the research project? You need to have overall goal, strategic goals that make you pursue the study. What motivates you? And why is it worthy? Why is it worthy of academic investigation? All those things need to be answered under the background. Thirdly, the importance of the proposal, the proposed research. What do you consider to be significant? Sometimes this might sound contradicting because we've got a dedicated section that says the significance or the importance of the study. But here you need to be able to even include something that shows that it is important to undergo the study. The function of this section is to indicate the general importance. Now, you hear the general importance of the field and to start giving an indication of the nature of the present understanding in the field. How do other researchers understand what is the present discourse? What are they saying? If it is the development of a framework for tourism, what is the present understanding about the tourism frameworks? And that is the reason why I presented tourism frameworks, that they are there, but they don't solve everything. They, for an example, we said they don't empower all the people, and that there needs to be further investigation so that other aspects that are problematic with the existing frameworks can also be addressed. And I've got an example here. And this is the organizational design again, the project that was completed in 2019. And it started as part of the background of the rationale that the Bill of Rights provides for the protection of the environment and guarantees the right of access to water by the South Africans. And prior to 1994, management of water was centralized and later decentralized to CMAs and at regional level post 1994. CMAs are governed by the boards that appoint CEOs who in turn appoint other staff members. Organization theory can be defined as the study of organizational designs and organizational structure and the relationships of organizations with the external environment. So I'm putting the study into context, specifically when I start to mention the organizational theory. So I'm introducing the studies about organizations. And I've already indicated CMAs, catchment management agencies, which are public entities. So I've made reference to the organizations already. But the other important aspect is the opening statement that makes reference to the Constitution that talks about a guarantee to the right of access to water, which is what these public entities manage. So the context is within the water environment and the specific zoom into the entity, the catchment management agencies per se. So I've under the background presented the context or introduced what the study is going to focus on to an extent. And here I've even extracted something from the same document. The researcher, after preliminary discussions with primary stakeholders, he became aware of certain problems and challenges that CMAs encounter every day, because these problems are, in theory, the reason for the study to be undertaken. The next section will elaborate on them. We said in earlier slides that the reason why the study might be undertaken might be that the researcher finds disagreement in the discourse, or the researcher finds that there are questions that are not answered, or there is something that must be clarified. So here, the researcher did find that there are indeed problems that affect the operation of the catchment management agencies. So it motivated the study, or the student or the researcher, to undertake this study. Now, here we again touch on the literature review. And here I don't want us to spend a lot of time because we had more than 2 sessions on literature review. But here they will are just going to show us the importance of literature review as part of the entire research proposal, because today we're talking about the building blocks of the research proposal. Under literature review, you need to make explicit and clear the central issues that will structure or shape and organize the research. The framework is vital for guiding the research, for ensuring coherence, and for establishing the boundaries of the project. in this section, you need to demonstrate that you have some sense of the debates in literature around the topic, and those debates should not be only be old. And when you want to understand recent debates, you read recent literature, you read empirical documents that would have that would present findings and results from the investigations that were undertaken in the field and recently so. Mere appeal to your own experiences or general knowledge is inadequate. We need to read and to show that we understand. So we won't say much about this, but in this section, you will therefore need to indicate the following aspects. Firstly, what is the context within which your research project is located? We have already indicated under background, that one. The other one is what conceptual framework will you be developing? Will you be developing your discussion on? Maybe that is to say, what is the starting point or point of departure of your research in relation to the literature in the field? So I'm not going to say much about it because we know why we do literature review. But here is an example of literature review, and this one has been taken from the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. The study was completed in 2001. Now, I indicate literature review reveals inadequacy in the body of knowledge. Vendor cultural conservation practices have never been used as per se as part of conservation, because conservation in South Africa by then it was in 2000. I started the studies in 1997, completed in 2001. By then, we were mainly using conventional ways of conservation, that is Western approaches in nature conservation. But when I was conducting this study, the literature revealed that cultural studies, the literature shows that cultural studies says something about the cultural practices in terms of the protection of the natural resources from the vendor cultural perspective. So that in the other time while I was presenting the theoretical framework, I indicated that we did not have enough literature that was published, that was written, that focused on nature conservation. It was either historical, it was cultural, or it was tourism related, it spoke, or it was educational. So it was just a whole spectrum and very unfocused and irrelevant literature from which we sourced some information to try and build a foundation for literature review. Very few literature was available. So this was just one another justification and the reason why the study was conducted. And this was revealed from literature. So literature is important in identifying gaps in literature and in the body of knowledge. So I was just wanting to make that example. So I also have another example here where I took an extract, and I think it is also from the same report, the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. I indicate there's confirmation of the present discourse in nature conservation because this literature review says, section says, in Africa, as elsewhere in developing regions of the globe, Western cultural assumptions have dominated people's view of conservation management. And this was by someone in 1993. Now, listen to the next statement. It says, because of this, most of the available literature deals with conservation from Western points of view. Now, here I say we are confirming that the present discourse is still mainly from a Western perspective. But, however, there is emergent of a promise. That's why I say one promising development has been that international conservation organizations such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature and the Natural Resources and the World Wildlife Fund have facilitated documentation of oral tradition about indigenous system of resource management and the cultural perspectives of nature conservation. they belong to indigenous knowledge, because most of what was known was not documented. It was mainly oral tradition. So this was confirmed by the literature that I read. So literature told me there is an attempt to try and document, but what we have, although there's an attempt, the majority, the larger bundle of the literature, from where we find the practices from the vendor cultural perspective, is either from history or cultural books or educational books, other books that are not per se entitled as conservation, or articles that are written as natural resource management articles. So this is the most important aspect that we get when we study. We find that there are gaps in adequacy in literature. Now we are skipping. We are going to look at the research problem or the research hypothesis. Remember, we were also, somebody was asking about the difference between a purpose statement and a research problem. We have already done something how the research problem looks like. Here, the guidelines have even put stroke research hypothesis. This part captures, this is the research problem. It captures the essential focus of your thesis, and it is therefore important that you spend time on formulating a clear, focused, and interesting problem that is researchable. It should be about the problem that we want to research. This problem is the engine of your thesis. It drives the various sections. It directs your discussion towards the destination you want to get to, and informs the way in which you will develop your thesis. Now, now here I said, when I explained the purpose statement, it shows us that it is a visionary. It shows us where we are going, because it points at the end destination. Now, the problem statement directs your discussion towards the destination that has been pointed on by the research objectives or the research purpose, where you want to get to, and it informs the way in which you will develop your thesis. So there is a complement between the purpose and the research, the problem statement, but both of them have got different objectives, but they support the same thing, that they will assist the researcher to reach the destination. The other one points at the destination there, that is the end point, and that is the product that we want. The other one then assists you to actually by directing you towards that. Your central research problem must be one main problem stated in a single sentence or question. If you can't do this, it is indication that you don't as yet have enough focus. You need to demarcate your problem more. I think that formulating a problem in the form of a problem question is very fruitful for giving your writing and reading direction. And some studies have got the main research question, and apart from the main research question, there are sub questions, and the sub questions or sub problems can be turned around to assist in the development of research objectives. And by the way, the main research question can assist the researcher to develop a research a purpose statement, because by turning the main research question, you then develop a research a purpose statement, which we say is in support of the research topic. The question must be indeed be a problem. It should focus on, for example, a gap in the debate, and I said a puzzle, a model, an ambiguity, a tension, or a paradox. And there I said, when I was talking about the literature, my literature review earlier on, I said there was a inadequacy. So if there is inadequacy, then we've got a reason to conduct the study, because we want to fill that gap. If there is ambiguity and there's model, there's puzzle, things are not in order, there are challenges, then we are to fix it by defining what they are. And this definition is the statement of the very problem, the very gap that exists, so that we can use these studies to actually investigate and solve that very gap and that problem. And I've got an example of a statement of a problem. I just skipped slides with the view that the discussion will cover them, but examples will also assist in covering that. Now, here is the example of a statement of a problem. And this is about organizational design again, the catchment management agency, and water source management. The problem reads like the statement reads like this. The water sector in South Africa faces the problem that there is no surplus water in the country and that available water resources are at their limit. CEOs of the catchment management agencies are currently experiencing specific problems. Oh, now that is part of the problem now. CEOs of the CMA, which is an organization, when it comes to the management of their respective catchment management agencies, most of them are interim. That is the CEOs. The employees of the Department of Water Affairs lodged a grievance in 2015 that stopped the CMAs from becoming operational. That is part of the problem. The CEOs are interim. The CMAs cannot manage their water sources. The employees have lodged a complaint, and then part of the problem, whereas CMAs boards are constituted by representatives of communities and water users, they lack the necessary skill. That is also part of the problem. And this is what we think that what I thought at the time that the research should assist in resolving. And I then developed a number of objectives, and there were a number of research questions. And the one major research question, the statement continues to say, the initial research topic was, okay, it is me here, as I comment. The initial topic was the role of acting chief executive officers of catchment management agencies in South Africa. And this was a real problem to me, as out of 9 catchment management, proto catchment management agencies, there were 7 acting CEOs and only 2 were permanently appointed. So 5 CEOs were not appointed. So maybe this is the reason why the entities were experiencing operational problems. Acting chief CEOs were not widely accepted within the Department of Water and Sanitation. The supervisor advised that the topic should focus on organizational design than the CEO. You see now, I used to say that if you are studying literature, it continues to clarify and refine your research topic, because literature review allows you to move forward. But when you question some earlier decisions that you've taken in your research proposal or in your research project, you go backwards and revise it in accordance with the new understanding as emerging from the literature. So my supervisor noted that although I felt that the major problem was with the CEOs, he noted that CEOs actually belong to organizations, and therefore the problems might be bigger than the CEOs. Then it might be starting from a wider organization. That is why we spoke about skills. We spoke about people that lodged a complaint. We spoke about the inability of the organization to execute their functions, as well as the challenges that the CEOs were confronting. So, on that basis, the literature actually assisted us to craft the topic better. But this was not outside the statement of a problem, and this was not outside the purpose of the study. And because the topic, when we change it, even the purpose of the study has to be refined so that it is aligned with the topic, and the statement and the purpose should support each other because they should be streamlined, all of them. And the guidelines that I am presenting today did not make mention of the research, the the research question outside the statement of problem, but it mentioned it as part of the statement of a problem. But I did not have a question inside the statement of a problem. My question was a question, an overall question, which was followed by sub questions, sub research questions, and they were not part and parcel of the statement of a problem. And out of the research question, I actually crafted a purpose statement. I turned around my major research question, and I found the purpose statement. And let's just read how the question was written. It says, with the discussion so far at hand, the following general research question can be asked. Can an analysis and implementation of the principles of organizational design assist catchment management agencies to manage their respective water management areas more effectively so that a better service can be rendered to their stakeholders, which is the public? This is how the question was framed. And I think I came with the purpose statement. By turning this one around, I said, the purpose of this study is to analyze, is to make an analysis and implementation of the principles of organizational design in order to assist catchment management agencies to manage their respective water management areas more effectively so that a better service can be rendered to their stakeholders, which is the public. I might have not read it correctly because I don't see it, but it's closer to what I've just said. But I was just demonstrating that you can turn a research question around to purpose statement. So, but I was just showing you that apart from the problem statement, I had a special research question. And that one was followed by specific research questions. And they read like this. The following specific research questions are applicable to this study. On which theoretical principles is the phenomenon organizational design founded with the context of organizational design studies? Now, this is also answering the question if the objectives can advise, guide on literature review. Now, this is one of the objectives, the very first one, that wants me to explore theoretical principles of the phenomenon organizational design. In other words, to explore the theory of organizational design, and that is done through literature. And this is what has led to me having a dedicated chapter on literature review that looks specifically on theories of organizational design. The second one, what is the history of the establishment of catchment management agencies in South Africa, and which legislation lays the foundation for water management? You see, legislation, literature review. And the history is also found in literature. So the two have dictated that I have 2 chapters on literature review. So this is how you can use your research objectives in terms of doing literature review. And the other one says, what is the current situation of the CMAs and their CEOs in South Africa with the focus on 2 operational CMAs and 7 proto-CMAs? Those are research questions. And the last one says, how can the CMAs and their CEOs be streamlined according to the theoretical principles, which is again literature review, and the results of the empirical study? You see now, literature review has been mentioned many times, 3 times in the 3 research questions. But research questions are there to support the major research question, and they are there to support the research topic. And these ones I said were outside the research problem statement, outside the statement of a problem, but they supported the development of the research objectives. I want to skip the section on research hypothesis, and we can deal with it sometimes in future. And I want to come now to the delimitation of the assumption or the assumption of which the study project should rest. And somebody was asking about the study in Western Cape and in Gauteng as part of the samples. And I think some of the statements that I was talking came from here. And when I was actually indicating how you cannot have too many objectives and how to determine and whether there are guidelines are made reference to delimitations. So you will hear how delimitations can assist you to actually limit the study, to scope it down, to narrow it down, to make it small, not to make it very broad. It is important that you state clearly the research assumptions that you will base your research problem on. This helps immensely in preventing you from the vague generalization that so often accompany the lack of proper research planning. A mini thesis in particular must have very clear definition, defined delimits. It must not go very broad. You cannot tackle everything. That is delimitation, that is making it small, choosing a specific sample and locality, or whether locality or group wise or focus. Make your study a manageable one. You see, if it is small, it's manageable, but if it is very huge, it becomes very ponderous. We cannot manage it. Rather than trying to do too much in a superficial way, focus on a small area which you aim to investigate in depth. All research projects must have a starting point and an end point. So that is what delimitation is all about. And because we don't have time, I do not want to read all of these aspects. Sooner or later, we are actually left with 16 minutes. I want to go to the example of the delimitation. There's a lot of discussion on this, but I want to go an example of delimitation of the study, and this is from the document, the report about the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. So the study to be confined to the Chivasa area only. That is why it reads like this. The researchers selected the Chivasa area for the study because its inhabitants live in the kind of rural circumstances in which they are more likely to have preserved the traditional cultural values, beliefs, norms, and customary practices of the Bavenda. So the Chivasa area is part of the Wembe district, and it is part of the Limpopo province. This is the former homeland of Venda. This is the former Venda homeland, the so-called the Republic of Venda. So by then, Vembe was not known as Vembe District Municipality, but it was just it was part of the districts that were there in the former Republic of Venda. So the study was not only not covering the entire Limpopo, was not covering the entire Vembe district and or the entire Venda, but it was confined to one tribal authority or Chivase local area. Most of the people in this area still practice subsistence modes of existence and depend on available natural resources for their survival. They have therefore preserved knowledge of traditional methods of natural resource conservation and management, acknowledge that has largely been lost to those Bavenda. A knowledge that has largely been lost to those Bavenda who have moved to urban areas and become excessively westernized. We are saying the indigenous knowledge system is getting eroded as people move to urban areas, because where it is practiced is mainly in rural areas, and that is where we find most of the natural resources. And this research was specifically focusing on this, so it went to the rural areas. Further example, because this study is primarily descriptive in nature, the researcher will not attempt to provide an analysis or evaluation of cultural practices in terms of modern nature conservation methods. The study will also not, you see, I'm limiting, I'm saying I will not do that. The study will also not attempt to compare modern and traditional techniques of conservation because of limitations, delimitation, because of limitations in terms of time and money. And I've mentioned all those. A thorough and careful description of vendor nature conservation practices will nevertheless provide the kind of data that future studies will need for analytical and comparative research. So I'm saying I will only do a description of the vendor conservation practices. All the others, modern nature conservation methods to be excluded. Yes. Comparative analysis to be excluded too. And this is how delimitation takes. And it happens, you sometimes have a specific section where you can call as delimitation. And when you, in it, you indicate what you will cover and what you will exclude. And that is the examples that I could, those are the examples that I could cite for now. But the last section, which is a component of our research proposal, is that of the research methodology. That is where you present your research approach, research design, world views or paradigms, and specific research methods of where will you collect data, how will you collect data, and how will you analyze, how will you present and analyze. So that is the last section that should go into that. And I do think that we might have made reference to research methods in the past, especially in earlier workshops when we spoke about the research approach, and we spoke about a number of research methods and designs and approaches. But we can still ask questions and make comments on them. But I want to quickly run to the examples that we have to show that even indeed in a specific study, the research methods section was presented. And this is again in terms of the organizational design project, whose example I presented even in earlier sections. Now, this is about the research design. I wrote like this in that project. For the purpose of this study, a qualitative research design will be used to uncover the current situation of the CMA or the proto-CMA and their CEO, which are some of them are interim in South Africa. Qualitative, listen, then apart from, okay, qualitative research begins with that, then I explain what it is. But the important thing is the choice of qualitative research design took into account the people and their behavior in their natural setting. It took into account that people in their setting and their behavior are the focus of the subject matter. That is why the design is qualitative. So this is a qualitative research. Qualitative research will allow the subject matter to be studied from within the communities and societies and from their point of view. That is how qualitative research is purposed to assist in conducting research. And the specific research design here, it was focus groups. And let's just hear further about this research methodology. Literature, the researcher will conduct a literature review in the early stages of the research process. Essentially, it will build on existing knowledge. We have already said something about literature review. But what about data collection methods? Data will be collected at the end of unstructured interviews, focus groups, observations and analysis of legislation, and official documentation and policies. Research participants will purposefully be selected. This is a sampling design, and we have to decide who to include and where and how. So purposefully, this was a non-probability sampling design. So that is what research methods could be set about, and we just read how I've written it from the specific project. And I forgot that I also have the last section on study contribution. And I just want to indicate that we always indicate that every study should contribute to the body of knowledge. And the PhDs are requested to contribute something very, very new in the body of knowledge. But other masters and honors only to demonstrate that they are familiar with the practices in research, that they can independently conduct research. Now, this is the example of the study contribution. Still, the organizational design study. It says the study will contribute to the body of knowledge of organizational studies and more specifically on organizational design. The study will thus be of value not only for science, but also for the Department of Water and Science, and for the catchment management agencies and the chief executive officers who manage the catchment management agencies. So our stakeholders are the CEOs and the Department of Water and Sanitation, who are the policymakers, as well as science. Science is the community of practice. This is the discipline under which we fall, and all our researchers and our colleagues, our supervisors, other people who are publishing, other students, and colleagues in the same discipline. The study will use organizational theories and empirical study to recommend how organizational problems of CMAs can be addressed. Because we said under the problem statement that they experience problems. So the study should make recommendations that indicate how problems facing the catchment management agencies can be addressed. The study will also contribute to theoretical principles of organizational studies. This, when I compared the findings and the theoretical principles, I found that they were in support of each other. There were no contradiction. And this is the end of the workshop.